Hello there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Ink. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
And welcome to our new episode of I Never Knew or Ink by Life Coach Maureen. I am so happy to have our listeners here. I'm so happy that we're growing and we're getting beautiful 5-star reviews. Keep that up. We're expanding this community and making it the new norm to tell your story, no matter how traumatic or struggle. It's all about how we all come out of it and we help one another. Today, guys, oh my goodness, I have a beautiful young lady with me today, and I found her on Matchmaker, and I looked at her story and said, oh, she has to be on Ink because she's fabulous, and she has a fabulous story, and I cannot wait for you to meet her. So Marci Warhaft is the resiliency rebel. She is a resiliency coach and recognized expert on body image and self-esteem, which I think is huge. She's the founder of the Fit versus Fiction Body Image Workshops and author of The Body Image Survival Guide for Parents and The Good Stripper, a Soccer Mom's Memoir of Lies, Loss, and Lap Dances. Oh, how fabulous is that? She shares in her raw, honest, and intimate detail of her eye-popping journey to self-discovery by turning a life of turmoil into an example of tenacity and resilience. Marci uses her experiences to help others release themselves of the shame, guilt, and insecurities that keep them from living their lives with the joy they deserve. Huge round of applause and welcome. Hi, Miss Marci.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
Marci has been under the weather, and I can only imagine meeting me in my high energy. She's probably like, "Oof, I don't know if I'm up for this today," but we'll bring her along as I always do. I do, because you have no choice. I'm gonna be lifting.
I'm good.
So, oh my gosh. This is just all of it amazing. So I'm not even going to read your book summary because I want it out of your words and how you describe it. So start with the beginning. We always talk about the story first and where you were, and then we'll get to where you are. Tell me.
Right. Well, I will tell you this. It's funny that your podcast is called I Never Knew, because I always said before I actually wrote my book, before I actually wrote my memoir, when I was younger, before even half the things that happened, I always said if I wrote a book, I'd call it Who Knew? That's it. Who knew? Because that's the thing. It's I never would have expected anything. And that's been the biggest kind of surprise, is that you can plan as much as you want. I mean, and it's such an old cliche, but I've really learned I don't even plan anymore, because my life, the way that it started, and I'll give you kind of an overview, because the other thing that one thing that kept me from thinking I could write my memoir for years was that there wasn't one theme. There were so many different things that had happened in my life. I'd had a therapist years ago say, this would make a great book, but nobody would believe that everything happened to one person. And I thought, how will I do? Like, there are so many different things. How am I going to make it work? And then I was like, well, it is my life. So if I just tell it, it kind of makes sense. So without giving too much away, because I put so much into writing it and telling it with such brutal honesty that I don't want to water it down by saying it too quickly or passing over too quickly. But in a nutshell, I started off in life, on paper, everything was perfect. I was the youngest of 3 kids. My parents were together. I guess sort of middle class. I felt very loved and very protected and very safe. I had a very, very close relationship with my mother and my older brother. I was very confident. I was a very confident, feisty little kid. I used to say I peaked when I was 10, but I was a little dancer and a little performer, and I would dance at camp and at school. And then I was also very opinionated. And I always was somebody, even at a young age, who, when I believed in something and felt passionate about whether it was a social injustice or just something that I was seeing right in front of me, I would speak up about it. And my mom was very supportive in that. She would always tell me that I had a voice and I had the right to use it. And she was amazing in that. She would also tell me that I was beautiful, but more than that, she would say that I was interesting and that I was intelligent. And that really gave me such a great foundation. So everything was going well until I hit about 10. And what had happened was, again, I'll sort of do an overview, is when I was 10 years old, my parents got divorced. And it wasn't great in the sense that I was the first kid in my entire school whose parents got divorced. So really nobody knew how to deal with it. My father had decided he didn't want to be a husband. He didn't want to be a father. And he left, but there was no support, whether emotional, financial, or anything, and left my mom to take care of these three kids, 10, 15, and 17. And that was tough. I remember saying to my mother once, "What's wrong with me that my own father doesn't even want to know me?" And she'd said, it's not you, that's his issue. But I will say that I still, as difficult as that was, I don't consider that to have been a traumatic situation in my life, because my mother was so spectacular, and I carry no bitterness with my father. He passed away years ago, but I carry no bitterness, and the rest of us got so much closer. So I was still pretty good. And again, at the time I wasn't close with my sister, but my brother really almost took over the role of my father, because my brother was spectacular. So between my brother and my mother, I was good. So really life changed for me when I was 17 years old and my brother got sick, and he was 21 and he died. When my brother passed away, my entire life changed. That was the complete catalyst for such a change in who I was. I had gone from being this feisty, strong, confident, optimistic little girl who thought that I could take over the world, to feeling like I didn't deserve to be part of it. I felt that, I felt unsafe, because if something bad, he hadn't been sick for a long time. To my knowledge, a lot was kind of kept from me because my mother was trying to protect me. So for me, it was kind of quick and not expected at all. I was in the middle of writing an English exam when they pulled me out of class. So I had really it blindsided me completely. So I was terrified all of a sudden, because I thought, if this could happen, oh my God, we're so unprotected. Anything. I felt very vulnerable. But then also, to me, he was perfect. And I felt the world needed him much more than it needed me. And I felt that it should have been me instead of him. And I went through most of my life since then feeling like it should have been me, and feeling like if I was going to be here instead of him, I couldn't be average. I had to be spectacular. I had to really earn my place. But I didn't. I had lost so much confidence that I felt there was no way that I could live up to those expectations. That the only person who was putting them on me was myself. But that, because I didn't feel smart enough or interesting enough or funny enough or anything enough at that time, it's still an issue now, but back in the 80s, at 17 years old, I thought, well, maybe if I could be pretty enough. And pretty enough was skinny enough. And so my brother's death gave birth to an eating disorder. And I battled an eating disorder for most of my life. So it was, and that's what, instead of me thinking, okay, I wanted to be an actress and a dancer and be in front of everyone, I just wanted to be as small as possible and hide from the world. Wow. And it completely rocked my foundation. And you can't you can't move forward in life with any kind of strength if your foundation is like quicksand. It had gone from feeling so safe I couldn't find my footing. And the problem was that took me through the next couple of decades where I was vulnerable to not only the things that I wasn't expecting from life, but also people who didn't have my best interests at heart. When you don't feel like you're worth much, then you expect a lot less, and you accept things that you shouldn't. And so quickly, sort of in a nutshell, it was from my brother dying, and then a year later, my mom had gotten remarried, and my stepfather was arrested for bank robbery. Actually, that's a hell of a story. And then right after that, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And then she went to remission. She was doing okay. And then I moved and I got married, and I had got pregnant, had a few miscarriages, got pregnant again while I'm pregnant, and my mother is so excited for me. My mom dies, and again, it was unexpected because she didn't want to tell me that we were living in a different cities at this point. She didn't want me to know that she was sick again because I had two miscarriages and was pregnant again. She didn't want to stress me out. But I got a call from my sister saying, "Come home now. Mom's not going to make it to the end of the week." And I had no idea she was dying. And here I was pregnant and and then my son was delivered early. And it was just, so these are the two people. I always say my brother was the invisible armor I wore out in the world, and my mother was my safe place to come home to. So at 28 years old, I had lost my armor and my home. So I was very vulnerable, very sad. But still, so now I had this baby to take care of, and I just wanted to be, if I could be half the mother my mother was, and that was my focus. Got pregnant again, had a very bizarre illness that put me in the hospital for several months with kidney failure and respiratory failure. Was not expected to make it. Had to learn how to walk again, talk again, breathe again on my own. Lost that baby, got out of the hospital. I mean, it's one thing after another. Got pregnant again, my second miracle baby, delivered.
All right. After the doggy doorbell. So this is just incredible that all of this has happened. So let's keep going.
Right. So here's the thing. So the problem was I had gone through at this point a lot of major traumas between the losses and my illness and my stepfather, but I didn't have a lot of time to recover in between. The hits kept coming really quickly. Because either I was just, I couldn't handle it. When my brother died, I pushed it down with the eating disorder. When my mother died, I couldn't deal with it because I was pregnant. I had to push that down. When I was sick, I couldn't deal with losing that baby because I had a 16-month-old at home. So I had to push that down and recover physically. And then when I was pregnant again, I couldn't think of anything else because I just wanted that baby to be healthy. So I never gave myself, or I didn't have the opportunity to heal or form any kind of scar tissue to get through to the next thing. And then what had happened was a therapist of mine who, I think she created the word, but she described what I was going through as traumatic overload. And it's just too much. It was too much without the breath in between, that my brain and just all of me said, no more. Like you can't, there is no more that we can handle. And the problem was that it wasn't done with me yet. So in the sense of, it wasn't done testing me yet. So at that time, which is such weird timing, but I was not, maybe a year and a half, I'm going to say, after I got out of the hospital, after being given a 25% chance of surviving, my marriage took a turn. And without getting into too much detail here, I get into detail in my book. But my marriage took a turn in the sense that my husband at the time there was a side to him I didn't know that he didn't share with me. He had some, let's say, desires or interests or fantasies, and I became more of a toy than his partner. And in the past, he had made suggestions about opening up our marriage or wanting me to be with other people, and I just wasn't on board with it. And he brought it up kind of here and there. But at this point, I think I was done fighting. And there was that part of me that I had never fixed, that part when my brother died that made me feel unworthy of being here. And to be honest, the moment before I was told that my brother died was the last moment I felt truly safe in the world. When I lost my mother and my brother, both of them, it was the last time that I felt unconditionally loved. So without the feeling of safety, without the feeling of being loved unconditionally, when he brought up to me again at this point that he wanted me to sleep with other people, and I was still dealing with my eating disorder. I hadn't yet gotten to recovery from that. So I'm also feeling I'll never be good enough physically, even though I was dieting and exercising and all of that. So there was a part of me that thought, okay, I'll never be loved again, but I could find some sort of value or worth in being sexual, in the sexual part of me, in the physical part of me. Well, then that's something. And so that as soon as I agreed to that, and the first thing was me sleeping with his friend, which was not a good experience for me, shocking. But as soon as that happened, it flipped a switch in me, and I started feeling like I had two purposes in life. One was to be the best mother I could be to my two toddlers, because I just wanted them. I wanted every minute of their life to be so fantastic. I wanted them to feel so loved all the time. Plus, having lost so much of my family so young and having almost died when I was 29, I also felt like, I don't know how long I have here. I could be gone tomorrow. So I wanted to make sure that every memory they had with me was a good one. So that was one focus. But then as far as me feeling valued, it was to be sort of take on that role. It was almost like playing this role of the vixen. But it took over. And that was where the traumatic overload came in, where it was almost a dissociative situation where I felt like a different person. And I was playing these two roles that were really I would go days without sleeping at all, because one thing led to another. It was, my book is called The Good Stripper. In fact, I only danced for a few months. That the double life that I led, and listen, that was significant enough. But the double life was how the promiscuity that came with that lifestyle, with me confusing being sexual with being sexualized, and again feeling like, I know these men aren't interested in me, and they would. I know what they're saying, and they think I believe them. I don't. But if I could feel like I have a little bit of control, even though I didn't, but if I felt like I could, then it gave me a little bit of something, which it never lasted. The shame and guilt that came with my behavior, that followed me for years. But it was this double life of, when I was dancing, I would literally, there were days when I would be with my kids and my husband, who knew everything. There was no deception. But I would be with them until they went to bed, my kids. And then I would drive to the club where I would work. And I never had a sip of alcohol the whole time. A drug. It was trauma that was fueling me. Plus I was still dealing with my eating disorder. So I was bodybuilding at the time. I actually started dancing to pay for my bodybuilding, because I had met a trainer who said he could get me to look like I always wanted to look, but I have to pay him, of course. And I didn't want, because I wasn't working and I was taking care of my children, I felt guilty taking money from the household. So I thought, okay, I need a job where I can make money, but still be with my family. And that was the only thing I could think of, which is crazy as it is. But I would put them to bed, drive to the club, I would dance. And I was the only dancer who had a protein shake in her locker. I mean, I would literally, oh, it's midnight, time for my shake, dance, get home at 4, change, go to the 24-hour gym I belong to, work out, get back, take a shower, and then be up with my kids. Every 24-hour place in my neighborhood knew me, between the 2 gyms I belonged to the 24-hour grocery stores. And I remember because I would go in after the gym, get what I needed for my kids. And I remember there's one woman that worked the middle of the night shift, and she was just like, why aren't you sleeping? Like, it broke her heart that I was doing shopping at 4 a.m, 5 a.m. But yeah, and that went on my whole kind of trying to be the best mom, and then also really giving myself to people that I if I could go back, I would change it. That part of it went on for a few years before things changed. And so my story really is, and here's the thing. I would love to say that once I got out of it, and the chapter where I talk about what stopped me from that was one of the hardest chapters to write. I literally wrote through the night because I didn't want to stay in that day more than one day. But I had a situation where it's crazy, and I won't even say it because I'd like people to read it because it's pretty insane. But it came to me. I got this very intense realization that my behavior wasn't just affecting myself. At that point, I felt like it's unhealthy for me, it's unsafe for me, but I'm not worth anything anyway, so it doesn't matter. But when I found out that I was hurting people, I didn't even realize that was too much for me, because that would never be okay with me. And that's when I stopped the behavior. But I'd love to say that my whole life changed then, that I got out of that behavior, got my marriage back on track, got healthy. But that's only partially true, because I did get out of that life. We got our marriage back on track, kind of. I went into a recovery program for my eating disorder. I had been on some medication because of my illness and surgeries, and got off everything and was physically healthy. I had started this body image program for kids, and I was on TV and writing for newspapers, and everything was great. But the thing that was the biggest sort of surprise, and the thing that was the anchor in a bad way that kept me tied to my past, was that I never dealt with the guilt and the shame that I felt for the behavior that I engaged in. So, for example, my book is dedicated to anyone who may be struggling to forgive themselves for the mistakes they made when they were just trying to survive. Because it took me a long time to realize that everything I did as a way to survive. And I used to judge myself so harshly for how I survived, instead of being proud of the fact that I survived. And that's where the power is. And so even though everything was going well, the shame and this guilt. And I had this horrible fear. Oh my God, what if my children find out? What if somebody saw me dancing? What if I'm in the grocery store and somebody comes over to me and says something? What if I'm on TV talking about body image for kids and somebody's wife calls up and says that I did some, it was awful. So I crashed again. And again, I started to feel like I don't deserve to be here. And my relationship, though we were together and we were both focused on our children, and I still felt completely unloved. So I felt worthless again. And like I was taking up space and resources that I didn't deserve. And that put some very scary thoughts in my head. And it was another day where I sort of met a stranger who said something to me that made me think, wait a minute, like maybe my story isn't supposed to end just yet. And there was something in me, which I honestly believe I credit my mother and my brother to, because they were there at the beginning, and because they lit the spark in me at the beginning. Even though I lost it for a while, it was there, and that flickered, and then I fanned it, and then I made the changes that I needed in my late 40s to actually move forward. And still I left my marriage, but it still took a few years before I decided to write this book. And the reason why the book changed my life is because I said, I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not, and I, all those secrets that I was terrified of people finding out, of my kids finding out, of everybody, I put them in a book and said, here's my story. Do with it what you will. And I was ready because I had stopped myself. I had stopped feeling shame over things. And nobody can shame you with things you're not ashamed of. And the power in that. Huge.
Oh, I'm speechless right now, and I'm never speechless. This is so amazing. You're wow. So let's unpack. Let's unpack. What's interesting to me, and you'll see me kind of look off to the side and write notes because you have so much I have to like write these notes because my memory's not that great. What's interesting to me is that the divorce didn't impact you very much, and you didn't feel an abandonment. When you felt abandoned, it was more like when your brother left. And that's really interesting to me because a lot of people will go back to when their parent left. And my own children, their father was very similar to what your father was and left, and I was your mom. And you actually make me feel good because I was trying to be that mom and dad for my kids, and that what you said at the end of this was it was in there. I just had to find it again. And then as your story progresses, it's so understandable when you have so much trauma over and over and over and you go into this survival mode. There's no logical weighing stuff out, even naming emotions. As I hear you tell your story, you're naming emotions. And that is so healthy when we finally get to a point where we go, I can say I was resentful, I was scared, I was insecure. You internalized your survivor guilt and put it
Mm-hmm.
on yourself with your eating disorder and said, I'm not good enough. Then you
Right.
put all this pressure on yourself that said, I need to be absolutely amazing without remembering that you were amazing. You are amazing. But it's a hard thing. So the duality that became you was Marci is living this beautiful, I got to be the mom that my mom was to me, and I'm going to be the best mom possible. And then over here, my husband has these expectations of me to meet his fantasies and do these things. I am right with you, girl. I had the same experience. My ex-husband, um, it was never love. And I thought, sex gets me love. And then after I realized with the domestic violence and sexual abuse from him, I realized they're separate. And I got to compartmentalize. And with your duality, you were able to compartmentalize and say, well, this life has nothing to do with this life. And
I tried. See that I had to
yeah,
just because the thing is how great would it have been if I could do that? I think the problem, not the problem, but the reality is you can't. So I think for my ex-husband, he expected that of me. He expected me to be the wife, the housewife, the mother, and do all that, and then at nighttime be something completely different. But I'm still me, and so for me, I couldn't. It wasn't like, okay, 8 o'clock in the morning, back to mom mode. I tried, but I mean, I'll tell you something, and it's such a weird, embarrassing memory, but it's something that I will always remember. I remember one day going from the strip club and going to the gym because that's what I would do, and I remember getting on a piece of equipment, like a piece of workout equipment, but the way I caught myself, the way I was like getting on it and getting off, it was almost like straddling somebody, like when you're doing a lap dance. And I caught myself and kind of looked around and thought, oh, that's not okay. And it's because you can't, like, I was still me, whether I was Marci with my kids or Cassidy at the club, that was still me. And that's what was so tough. I mean, I would drive around and, if somebody, that was the problem. If a man gave me attention, I just drank it up, and it wasn't like, nope, this is mom time. I'm not going to, because I'm just human being. And so that's what was so tough. It would be great if I could have just been like, 9 to 5 me, or not even 9 to 10 o'clock me, and then 10 p.m. to 7. It's just, that's not how I worked. I also think men and women are different with that, with the compartmentalizing. But yeah, but I just have to say, because I thought you really put it brilliantly when you were saying that we can identify how we're feeling is really important, because I think what happens is so many of us, like I did, where at first I just thought I'm a bad person, not realizing, wait a second, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling abandonment, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling resent. Like these are all so it's not that I'm a bad person. I am somebody who is just feeling all of these other things. But when we're so caught up in it, we're not giving ourselves the understanding and the empathy to understand, wait, why am I feeling this way? I'm feeling down because of all these other emotions. We just tend to knock ourselves down. And I think we do such a disservice to ourselves by doing that. Whereas we can kind of go, well, why am I feeling like this? Well, and that's when I started to reach out for help. That was one thing. I mean, I thought I was bipolar. I thought I had some major issues. And my therapist is like, you're not. But I went to see like a specialist, and he's like, look at your life. He's like, you were just honestly reacting to things in your life. So you think you were being crazy, but you weren't being crazy. You were just, now I reacted differently than some other people. I didn't go to drugs or alcohol or whatever. I went to sex and, well, food. But we're so hard on ourselves. We expect to just fly through everything and not let it affect us. And when it does deeply impact us, we think that we're not strong enough when we're just human.
That is perfection. We're humans having a human experience. My situation is not me, it's me
Right.
having a situation. And that's really that separation of when I say duality and I say the compartmentalizing. Through your action you were compartmentalizing, but internally you're like, wait, no, I'm still this whole person, and something is not connect, there's a disconnect here. And all of us can relate to when you don't have that self-worth, you're going to always find validation on the outside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to do things that you would not do if you had finally found that self-confidence and that self-validation. But you had lost your foundation. You got the rug pulled out from underneath you. The unconditional love rug got pulled out from underneath you with your brother and your mother, because your brother took this role on of you're safe, you're protected, which in essence replaced your father, and
Mm-hmm.
really sort of filled that void. I think a lot of us find ways to fill the voids, and this was how you were filling the void, right?
Trying to, and
Yeah.
it doesn't. And then if you don't have the right support around you, how can you expect to be I mean, we are all doing the best we can, and sometimes our best is great and sometimes it's not great, but it's the best we can. And I think we need to be kinder to ourselves. I mean, I always say I think everybody should write a book, whether it's to be published or not. I one thing I found that was so helpful about it was that it was in writing stuff down, in writing my experiences down, getting them out of my head and out of my chest. That was when a lot of situations that I thought I had worked through, I looked at them and went, oh, okay, now I understand why I acted that way, or now I understand why I felt that way. There were still certain things, not even big things, but things that I still thought I had behaved wrong, and kind of went, no, okay, I get it now. And I think sometimes when it's in your head, it gets mixed up with everything, and it's so hard to understand. But when you get it out on paper and you see it almost objectively, then you realize, oh, okay, no, of course I felt sad, or of course I felt angry, or of course I felt resentful. Like that's normal, and I think it does help us. It helps us be kinder and more sensitive to ourselves, which I think so many of us are that way with other people, but find it hard to do to ourselves, with ourselves.
Ah, all of that, and the theme with this podcast and then telling our stories, as everyone says, once I got it out, I started the healing. And whether it's speaking, writing a book, doing a podcast, doing a blog, I don't care what it is. I've always said I'm not a big writer, I'm not a big journaler, and it's something as a life coach I tell everyone, you need to journal. You need to write a letter of forgiveness to
Mm-hmm.
yourself, to those
Right.
who have hurt you. And when I journaled at the worst time in my life, you're absolutely right. Sometimes just the black and white of it. Because when we're in our head, we stay on the hamster wheel and in the insanity
Mm-hmm.
cycle of, I add to it. It's like I picture in the cartoons, you know, when they have a ball rolling down the street and
Mm-hmm.
more stuff just keeps getting added to it. That's what I picture our heads, and I call it the rabbit hole. Like, stop before you go down that rabbit hole of that ball rolling down the street that's picking up more and more stuff, and that fake it till you make it thing, and that
Mm-hmm.
the perfectionism, idealism that you had externally, physically, for one, and then also I got to be a perfect mom, and I've got to
Mm-hmm.
be complacent to whatever my husband wants because I need to have a perfect marriage. So your idea of loss from your brother and your mother, your idea of your purpose was, I need to be perfect going forward because my brother doesn't have this chance to do this any longer.
Right.
And it's impossible. It's an impossible expectation. And with expectation will always come disappointment. And the worst thing is to disappoint ourselves because we beat ourselves up
Mm-hmm.
worse than anybody else. So what was the turning point when you just said, okay, I've got to get out of this? And then when did the momentum pick up for you where you're like, I can turn this into the book and this
Mm-hmm.
amazing life for my children?
So again, the first time it was just realization that I was hurting other people and that it was unhealthy. But when I really made the change, and it took me from then, it was over a decade before I made the other change because I was still, there was things that I was questioning about myself, that I'd never felt very traditional, and I never felt like, so as much as I wanted to be a mom, did I want to be a wife? I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of questions that came up at the time, but I didn't feel that I had the right to question because I did make this commitment and it was all about my kids. And so I felt really figuring out who I was and what I needed from life, that would have been selfish. So I kind of just did my best with what I had for over a decade. And then when it wasn't working for me, I think one of the big things was I did get to the point where I would drive my kids to school. They were both in high school at the time. And every day on the way back, past an underpass, and think, what if I turned my wheel a little bit to the right? What if I stepped on the gas? What if, would it be quick? Um, and that's a horrible way to think, when you start thinking maybe your family would be better off without you. I remember thinking my husband would be fine, but my kids, I got to a point where I thought maybe they'd be fine, maybe they'd be better. And that's a really tough place to live in. And there was also part of me that thought, well, I've got people there. I've got my mom's past, my brother's past. I had lost babies, so there were people there. But I felt like, first of all, I thought of my kids. It was always my kids. I always say I gave them life, but they saved mine, because I felt like, well, first of all, I didn't want that to be part of their story. I didn't want them to have to live with that. But also, even on a smaller level, I knew who I was, at least before all the trauma came. I know I was this happy kid. Like I said, I kind of peaked at 10. I was this outgoing, feisty, funny kid. And I thought, here they're seeing me. They're seeing me sad. They're seeing me stressed. That's not who I am. That's not, when I worked so hard for their memories to be so great, I did not want, the end of my life to come and for them to think, oh, she was always sad, or she was always mad, or because they didn't know the backstory. They didn't know, I had hid everything from them. They didn't know what my relationship was like. So I thought, I don't want that. Like, I don't want, my mother had a really hard life, a very hard life. And yet she was love personified. I mean, she was just pure joy. And so I felt I wanted them to know me, the real me. And I knew that I could not stay in that situation and give myself a chance to be who I supposed to be, or who I really was. And so that's when I decided, okay, it's tough. It's a tough, guilty thing to decide that you're going to break up your family. But I really felt that it was the best thing for everybody. And that's when it was tough. I still wasn't close with my sister at the time. We're close now, but we weren't. And I didn't have any family. I had reconnected with my father a few years earlier, but he had passed 6 months later. So there was nothing. I didn't have anything. I had never, I'll tell you this too. I had been so dependent in my marriage and felt again like I was too dumb to figure stuff out and to know how to do anything. And I sort of played my role where I had never paid a bill in my life. I'd been married, we had been together for 24 years. So I didn't know anything about, I mean, I could get throw a major life obstacle at me and I could do it. But, you know, tell me how to pay a gas bill. I'm like devastated, terrified. And here I was deciding at 46 years old, okay, like I literally went into my bank and said to the woman, I understand nothing and I need to understand everything. Talk to me like I'm 10 years old and I will not be offended. And I had to learn. I'm still learning. 6 years later, I'm still learning things that I feel like I should have known decades ago. And that's when I have to kind of be kind to myself and go, okay, but you didn't have a normal life and you're doing it now, you know, and that's the thing. But I had made that decision where a lot of people, we live with that, the evils you know versus the evils you don't know. And I know that there are a lot of people who stay in situations that aren't great because they're not terrible. And that's why I thought, it's not terrible. It's not good. It's not terrible. And it got to the point where it was terrible enough. And I thought, I can't go on like this. So for me, even though leaving and starting over and doing all that on my own was scary and it could have been a disaster, for me, there was hope. Because for me, staying, I knew with that, there was some safety there for sure. Feel good. There's a physical safety, I guess, but I would have been miserable for the rest of my life. And I just couldn't do that. So for me, it was not knowing the future felt hopeful. And I also felt, I think when you go through enough bad stuff, you sort of learn that you can survive it. So I thought, if I make this big jump, if it doesn't work out, okay, it'll knock me down and I'll get up again and figure out something. But I had to try because it could be, you know, or even better. Better was good. And I owed it to myself for that. So the first thing was just leaving and figuring out who I was. I mean, I'll tell you this. I remember when I moved. We both moved out of the marital home. And I moved into a place, and a friend of mine who I'd known off and on since high school, she'd come to my place and she brought me like stuff for the bathroom, like kind of glitter boxes to put things. And I said to her, I'm so not thanks, but I'm not a glitter. She said, you don't know who you are. She said, who knows? And that was the thing. I had completely lost who I was. I didn't know. I never went out with girlfriends for coffee. I didn't socialize. I had to really find myself again. So there was that part of it. And then I decided to write my book when I was turning 50. So it was maybe 3 years later when I decided, okay, now I feel stronger in who I am. I know who I am pretty much, getting there. Still, every day it changes or it evolves. But now I was tired of meeting somebody and thinking, how much do I tell them about myself? Like, when do I tell them about myself? How are they going to react if they hear? What about my kids still? Like, what if they hear something? And it was just, I did not want to get to the end of my life feeling that I never gave myself the chance to be fully me, because I kept myself kind of in the shadows a bit because I was so afraid of people seeing all of me. So better they didn't see enough of me. And then I was like, no, I'm done. I'm done being afraid. I'm done feeling shame. I'm done with that. And I really, I say that I made the decision to ruin my own reputation. So I decided that, you know, here I had a program in schools about body image and self-esteem with kids. And here I'm going to be talking about how I used to dance and use my sexuality. And my kids were going to hear that I used to dance. They didn't know any of that. I didn't know how people were going to react to me, but I was at a place where I was okay with it. And that's key. Like I needed to wait until I was okay with whatever backlash I would get. And there's something about owning your story that's so powerful, because nobody could hurt me with it. Nobody could come to me and say, hey, 20 years ago, you used to be like, yes, I did. I wrote about it. Like, there's not, you can't, there's nothing. And I've had people from my past try to reconnect with me, like people not from a good part of my past. And I'm like, no, like it doesn't bother me. I don't feel, I mean, I feel for the woman that I was. I wish that I would have behaved differently, but I'm not, I used to hate that part of me. And I just feel so much empathy for who I was then. I love, I still love that person. And I just wish that I wish I had the strength then that I do now to pull myself out of that. But I'm not mad at, at, at her, at me at that time. And it was, and the biggest thing, and this is what I think has been so, the biggest eye opener for me, is that once I did that, once I hit post on my first Facebook post saying, I wrote this book, it's out, like it's, and let me tell you, people didn't know. There were a handful of people who knew some of what had happened, but it was a shocker. I mean, I had people I went to camp with when I was 7 messaging me going, hold on a minute. But what I found was, instead of people shunning me or turning their backs on me, it was the opposite. I either had people I knew, like I said, from a million years ago saying, I wish I'd known, or, oh, I get it now. Or, I had, or I just, mostly it was, I had no idea. But then I had people who I don't know, and I get it every day. I'll get messages from people from all over who are saying, oh, I can relate to not everything, but they could relate to loss. They could relate to relationship stuff. They could relate to negative body image stuff. There's something that people can relate to, and not everybody feels safe enough to talk about it or to share it. But seeing somebody else talk about it openly and honestly without shame makes them realize that, oh, wait, I don't need to feel ashamed. Now, maybe they still can't about it yet or share it. Maybe they don't have that safe net around them, but to know that you're not the only one that's been through it, oh, that's such a huge relief. I mean, sometimes just seeing your feelings put into words by someone else is empowering. It's just, when you go through something and you feel like you're the only one that's gone through it, that's very isolating, and that keeps us in the dark way longer than we need to be. But when you see somebody and you go, wait, I relate to that. And then you think, oh my God, like, I'm not alone. That's not so crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm not a bad person. There's so much power in that. That's why I wish that we would stop trying to turn everything into a positive. Like, some things happen. That's why I'm the resiliency rebel, because I don't think everything happens for a reason. I don't think my traumas made me stronger. I don't think I am who I am today because of what I went through. I don't. And there are things that I regret, and there are things that I wish I could change. I can't, but it's about how we move through it. And the big part of that is knowing that we're not alone, and that there are so many things that we think keep us separate from people that are the connectors. And I'm so glad that I shared my story. And I'll tell you, it's still not easy. If I'm out and somebody says, what do you do? And I say, I'm a writer. And they say, oh, what's your book called? I'm always like, it all depends, like, who I'm talking to. Sometimes I'll say, Google me. Because you say the good stripper, and it's just like, oh, and and you're very vulnerable. I'm very open in my book. I mean, my kids won't read it, they know about it, and they're very supportive, but they don't, there are things that you don't want to read about your mother. But I knew if I was going to write it, I was going to write it openly and honestly, and in as much detail as I could. And that's what I did. So it did make me vulnerable, but owning it. I'm still owning my story. And so I feel like that really gave me the freedom to now go through the rest of my life with just unbelievable honesty and authenticity. And that's the only way that I can exist. That's how it is for me.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say to you was, people do not realize how much being your authentic self is empowering. There's this fear. One of the things I tell my coaching clients is, your desire to have something has to be greater than your fear of the unknown of it.
Mm-hmm.
And not knowing what's on the other side of that veil of, I've got to cross over. It's a scary thing, but I have never heard anyone who's been successful and resilient say, I regret taking that step. I only hear people who regret not doing something sooner or not doing something at all. So it's the gratitude for the experience. And like you said, the whole everything happens for a reason, or did I ask for it? I think on the big scheme of things, we talked about this before we got on. I think I asked for lessons that expand me as a person or as a soul. And however that presented itself doesn't mean I really liked some of the stuff, but I'm grateful when I look back for the lesson that it taught me, and that I'm so much more expanded to be my authentic self and to be the unconditionally loving person that I am, to do this. This, in a nutshell, what
Mm-hmm.
you said was finding your voice. And it's really amazing that what you do when people react and say, gosh, I read your book, and you were so vulnerable and you were so honest. You plant that seed for every other person that is not at that stage yet. And
Mm-hmm.
I always say, you're getting ready to be ready to be ready. You'll know when you're ready to make your move, and
Mm-hmm.
your timing is perfect. I also I find it interesting. Every one of my guests, I find this thread of connection I have with you. First of all, I think we're the same age, because you're 52.
Yeah.
Boom, sister. I knew it. And I found my soul journey at the same exact time that you did. It was late 40s.
Wow.
So I'm like, oh my God, she is me, I am her. And it was this repetitive narcissistic relationships that I had been in because I didn't think I was worth anything. And I, like you, didn't have unconditional love. You lost your mother and your brother who gave that to you. I didn't have that when I grew up. I felt it was very conditional and codependent. So throughout my entire life of these relationships with narcissists, it was, what do I have to do to make people love me? And so I relate to you. I had my little phase after divorce of being promiscuous because I only identify with being a mom and being a wife. I got married
Right.
I got married at 18. What the hell
Wow.
did I know about being Maureen, being a woman, being independent? So I'm out here in the world suddenly dating. I didn't really date. I mean, I got
Right.
married at 18, and now I'm like, what do men want? Well, my 17-year-old, 18-year-old mind is completely not caught up with my 29-year-old body, which
Mm-hmm.
you and I got divorced at the same exact time as well. It's
Mm-hmm.
just insane, that connection. So I'm out there just thinking, oh, well, if I give them sex, it'll grow to love. They'll love me once they see this. And man, that being so wrong about that, and having to realize that I did it over and over and over. I'm a slow learner. That's okay. Sometimes you just have to repeat the thing over and over to
Mm-hmm.
see it,
Mm-hmm.
like a diamond, right? You got to see every facet of it. That's how I learned in my life, was give me the lesson, but give me it 10 times so I can see every side.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are. It would be great if you learned it the first time, but I don't
Right?
think that happens. But one thing you said though before that I want to just talk about for a second is when you said, like, not everybody's ready to take that step, or you're afraid of what's on the other side. And I think a big part of that too is that we don't understand how strong we are. Like, one thing I hear all the time is when people say, you're so strong, I couldn't have gone through half of what you went through. And I don't think that's true. I mean, it's, thank you, but I don't think that, honestly, I don't think that I'm any stronger than a lot of people. I just didn't have the choice. I mean, that's what it came down to. If somebody had said to me, if somebody had come to me when I was 15 years old and said, okay, this is what the next 40 years of your life are going to look like, I wouldn't have looked at it and went, all right, I can do that. What? I would have said, nope. Like, no, are you kidding? Like, sign me out after the next 10. I'm not, there's no way, but we just don't have a choice. And so that's why I always say that my traumas, my experiences didn't make me who I am. They took me away from who I was. It was my resiliency that brought me back. And so that was there. That was planted when I was younger. So yes, I went through these things and I've learned what I can do, but that's my trauma. I'm not giving my trauma the credit for that. I'm not giving my losses and the betrayals that I experienced the credit for my strength. It took me away from that. But it was the resiliency that was always there that I didn't know was there. That came out. But it was there already. So when people say I couldn't survive it, let's hope you never have to know. But you could. There are people who go through horrific things and they survive it. You go, oh my God, how did they didn't have a choice. Something kicks in. So I don't think people give themselves enough credit to know that even if you really want something, but you're afraid it's going to fail. Okay. Like it might fail, but you'll survive it. And you might learn something from that. It's just the exercise, even if it's just the exercise of, oh, I'm going to do something that's scary. And then it doesn't work and you survived it. You go, oh, that wasn't so bad. So now something else is exciting and I want to try that. And now I know that if it doesn't work out, I'll be okay. I'll just try something else. But I don't think we give ourselves, I know that people just, they give me too much credit because it's not that I'm any stronger than anybody else. I just, life made me prove it. I wish it didn't, but it did.
I know. And it's a mindset. It is a mindset. I look at people who haven't had a lot of experiences that were very traumatic or crisis driven. And they are determined they will not make it through something. They could not make it through something. And I completely agree with you. And I know that for years and years and years for me, my life was crisis driven. It's all it was. It was one after the other after the other. You said something so great at the beginning. I didn't have time, Maureen, between crisis to stop for a minute and even evaluate what's going on or to feel. And to feel is to heal. You didn't have time. And I know I was like one thing after another. So my mindset at the time was, oh, it comes in threes, or these are the cards I was dealt. Well, this is my life. If I didn't have bad luck, I've had no luck at all. I didn't have any time to say I have choices here because I did not feel like I had choices.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was past it and sat for that 2-year journey that I did where I'm like, hold on a second here, Maureen. You have choices. You just haven't had time to make choices, and you haven't made time to make choices, and you haven't told yourself that you're allowed to have choices. And I'm going to repeat the most beautiful thing that you said. My trauma didn't make me strong. My resiliency did. Because it was there all along in my authentic self. And it is. If people will just go inside, literally, figuratively, go inside. I've always said COVID kind of made us do that. It kind of made us all go inside, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and
It made us
physically.
stop. Yes.
Take a break. Pause, guys. Do a reflection. Do a self-awareness. Yeah. Face those things that are ugly. Face those dark places that you've hidden away. The theme that I've heard from every guest who's had any sort of trauma or difficulty is, I pushed it down. My last guest before just said, I squished it down. So we push it down. It's never going to go away. It just piles up until eventually there's no more. You can't push it down like a trash compactor. Eventually you got to take the trash out. And that's what you did. And that cleansing of the writing and the being authentic and vulnerable. And you're right. You can't shame me for something I've already owned.
I survived it. That's the thing. Like you can't, if my traumas didn't kill me, being judged on how I survived them is not going to hurt me. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if all those things I went through didn't kill me and you're going to judge me on how I survived, do you think that's going to hurt me? No.
Oh, I have to repeat that. Listeners, oh my God. She's so amazing and so profound. If my trauma didn't kill me, do you think your opinion of how I survived it is going to? Oh, what a beautiful perspective. You're absolutely right. That's it. That's the mic drop moment that we're having with Marci. So as we wrap up, I always ask, if you had a banner and you were downtown marching with 100,000 people behind you, what does your banner say for your movement?
Oh, it's not so succinct, but I mean, I really believe that stop trying to live up to anybody else's expectations. Live your life your way.
Live your life your way. It is that succinct. It's that simple, simplistic, right? Live your life your way. Sounds easy, doesn't it? But boy, when you've been through it, it is
It's
not
not
easy.
even. We're conditioned at birth to do things, whether it's personally or professionally. We're put on this track without realizing it. And if it's not the right track for us, instead of us saying, "Oh, you know what, this isn't the right move for me," we think, "Oh, there's something wrong with me because it's not working for me." And so the powers in going, wait a minute, this just isn't for me. I don't want to spend my life trying to live up to someone else's expectations of who I should be. I want to figure out who I should be and live that way.
Fabulous. So fabulous. It's instead of blaming ourselves for something not working out, we have to appreciate the pivot. We have to appreciate the walk around the
And not do it like, sorry, the thing is, I always say I spent so much of my life feeling like I was this broken puzzle piece, and I kept trying to fit myself into the puzzle, and there was something wrong with me. And then I realized, no, I was just in the wrong puzzle. Like, there was nothing wrong with me. I was just trying to fit myself into a life that didn't fit me. And instead of me saying there's nothing wrong with that life, it's just not for me, I thought I'm doing something wrong because I don't fit. It's okay to not fit. It's okay if you do fit, but it's okay to not. And we meet people in the world who don't fit what everyone else is doing. I mean, you need that. And so, yeah, it's all about not trying to live up to anybody else's expectations of who you should be and figuring out, because if you do that, you don't give yourself time to figure out who in fact you are.
Yes. And I think we need to pay more attention to things that don't feel right and act on them immediately. I think too many of us have made excuses for mistreatment, for abuse, for situations when right off the bat, and that's what I've learned now. That's where I'm at now is when it doesn't feel good, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a family member, whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
career, whether it's an interaction with someone, with a stranger, I know it now. I always say, I don't see people, I feel souls. And
Yes.
you know when it doesn't feel right immediately, but we've learned how to shut up our gut and go with our head. Well, I should be nicer.
Mm-hmm.
I should I should give them a chance. I should, just
Right.
go along with it. And no, I think when you reach 52, whoop whoop, I think you just get to that point in life where you're like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore
Absolutely.
because it doesn't feel right for me. And if it doesn't feel right for me, I'm not being authentic. If I'm not authentic, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
empowered. So there we are. My dear Marci, oh my gosh, you are so fabulous. My last question I ask every guest is,
All right.
what is your shameless self indulgence?
Oh gosh. Can I pick two?
Sure, you pick 20. I
Okay,
don't care.
well, one is chocolate. Everybody knows that about me. I live on chocolate. I need chocolate every day. People need coffee. I need chocolate every day. And you know what? I spent so many years battling my body and not allowing myself to have these things that I, yeah, I will never get to the end of my life and be like, I should have eaten that cookie because I've eaten the cookie. The other thing is public dancing. That's my thing. I literally will walk down the street for hours and I will have my music and I will dance down the street. And I will get, I will get, oh God, my favorite is, recently I had a police car drove by and the woman was driving and she gave me a little dance move through the window where I'll get like smiles or thumbs up. And that's awesome. I have no shame in my public dancing game.
Spreading the light, spreading the light. I have a convertible and I had the top down. I had my 14-year-old grandson who I'm raising now in the passenger seat. And he has like the cutest little dance that he does. And there were two girls in the car next to us and they were just, oh my God, they were dancing with him. So
Best.
joy, just it's spreading joy. It's saying, you know what? Let's just be us guys out in the world. Let's just spread that light and that fun. Let's be kids. Let's have fun in this
Exactly.
life experience. Oh, that is amazing. I want a video. I'm going to demand a video of you doing that because I know someone has filmed you. But Marci, thank you for your time. I always say it's 1 hour that you'll never get back, and you gave it to me, and I have so much gratitude for that. You are truly amazing, and I really am so grateful for your story and your sharing. And I know there are a listener or many listeners out there. First of all, guys, get her book. I really want you to go get her book. And if you want to work with her, she's got workshops. Go on to lifecoachmaureen.com and I'll hook you guys up with her, and go get her book, The Good Stripper, A Soccer Mom's Memoir of Lies, Loss, and Lap Dances. Just such an authentic and vulnerable story that she shared and put her heart and soul into for her healing, and I think it will help everyone else as well. Go buy my book at Amazon. My dog is my relationship coach, and my dog is more enlightened than I am, which is in the same realm as Marci, where we talk about how to be your authentic self and live your path the way you're supposed to. So
I'm also, sorry, just to say quickly, I'm all over social media, and I love when people reach out to me. So anyone who's listening who just wants to reach out to me through social media, feel free. And my book is also on Audible. So if you are an audiobook person, you can listen, and I tell my own story. So that's an option.
Oh, yes. Oh, I love that. Actually, that was my next thing was, Marci, give us websites, give us any events you have coming up, anything. This is your platform to share this with everyone so we can grow your audience and expand your readership as well.
Okay. Well, like I said, so I'm on everything from TikTok to Facebook to Instagram. It's just Marci Warhaft, easy to find me. And there's a lot of dance videos on there too, you'll see. But then there's, for the coaching, it's just marciwarhaft.com. And to get my book, you can go through Amazon or Audibles, but also through thegoodstripper.com. They have access to all of them. That'll pretty much take you, because the marciwarhaft.com will also take you to Fit versus Fiction, which is my program for kids and body image and self-esteem. So I'm pretty easy to find. Can't
hide from my Marci girl. That's what I always say. There, you have no excuse for not being able to find my guests, because I'm going to throw it out there on every single platform, and I'm easy to find, so you can find me to find her. So yeah, it's just wonderful what you're doing. Keep shining that light. Keep dancing, sister. And I am so happy I met you. So thank you.
Me too. This was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Inc. community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.